Hello, weary YouTube traveler. You've stumbled upon the dark and creepy Crypt of Tales. Please, do step inside with me. Make yourself at home. Feel free to have a lay down on the couch just there, because tonight, I have a bedtime story for you. Welcome to Tales from the Cr'wip't. I want to start you guys off with introducing you to the tools of the trade that you're seeing on the screen. I'm currently working on Holy Kitty by Rokkari at rokkari-dpa.com. I am using alien putty in various forms depending on the pen. I am using Zodiac Shadows Etsy shop, 3D printed pen and straightener. Using Bee's Crafty Corner papers to cover the sticky parts of my canvas. I'm using an ephemera 3D Deep 6 tray, Etsy shop, and I'm using some 3D printed pen tips from Dynamite Diamond shop on Etsy. Links to all the shops will be left in the description box down below. Now let's jump into tonight's tale. I want to start us off with a kind of a personal note, our first side note right out the gate. My awareness of this story and its mythos is courtesy of my daughter, Leah Marie Brock, published author of the young adult paranormal genre book Within My Skin. If anyone's interested, it's on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. She came to me the other night and informed me that she might have figured out why a while back she had been catching glimpses, like out of the peripheral vision, of like a shadowy dog, like a big dark dog, out of the corner of her eye after a visit to the emergency room and subsequent prescription regimen of various medications, including Benadryl. My daughter, for those who don't know, did have a very life-threatening adverse reaction to a medication that was injected into her at the rheumatology office and had to be treated at the emergency room. And anyone who's familiar with like anaphylaxis and other serious allergic reactions like that, you know that they give you a cocktail of varying things, including Benadryl. And we'll get to why that's important. But she had been searching for what she might have been experiencing and came across this urban legend that seems to explain it all. While Halloween may be over, there's still a spooky figure out there that you might need to keep an eye out for. For many of us, allergy season is no joke. Itchy eyes, runny noses, and sneezing are just a few of the symptoms that might make life miserable for those affected. But amidst the pollen and the dust and the cold air, a legend has emerged. A figure shrouded in mystery who brings relief and joy to those in need. The Benadryl Hat Man. The online community is rife with myths and urban legends that seem to emerge right out of some plugged-in collective conscience. Slenderman is a popular internet myth, as is Momo or the Rake. But have you heard of the shadowy figure less malevolent than he is mysterious? A man that stands around the corners of your vision, ready to tip his hat in greeting at a short notice. Here's all you need to know for your next full-body shudder, courtesy of the Hat Man. Since the late 2000s, people have shared their stories of a strange vision that sounds remarkably consistent from one account to the next. It's the tall silhouette of a man, he's wearing a brimmed hat, and is a presence that tends to appear when you're in bed at night. Quote, "What I saw gripped me immediately with fear and dread," writes Timothy M. Brown Jr., who, from 2008, has curated a blog where anyone can describe their encounters with the Hat Man, describing his first encounter of the apparition as a teen in the 1990s. Timothy goes on to say, quote, "The man had no distinguishable features whatsoever. I could see no eyes, no nose, no mouth, only blackness. He looked like a shadow, only darker, much darker. He had a wide-brimmed hat and a long trench coat that flowed as he moved." As far as I can tell, this was near the beginning of the Hat Man's tenure as an internet urban legend. Stories like these are often referred to as something called creepypasta. The kind of story that gets endlessly repeated and revised until it's embedded itself in the cultural consciousness. Now, this part might sound familiar to fans of the series because we've talked about this man before. Not the Hat Man, but this next guy, Slender Man. For years, the Slender Man, also tall, also featureless, and also terrifying, was the most prominent of these phantoms, in part because of the shocking 2014 case, which we also talked about here, where the two 12-year-old girls viciously stabbed their friend in order to appease the fictional character Slenderman. Lately, however, the Hat Man has emerged as the horror meme of the moment. A Hat Man subreddit has been going strong for years. He's been the subject of fan art and numerous YouTube and TikTok videos, including a 2019 mini documentary by Quartz that associated him with the biological phenomenon of sleep paralysis. But on 4chan and elsewhere, the Hat Man is often referenced as a hallucination brought on by the abuse of diphenhydramine, or DHP, the active ingredient in the over-the-counter allergy medication, say it with me, Benadryl. However, it has been claimed that any mind-altering substance taken to excess is thought to grant access to the Hat Man, even caffeine. No, not my Dr. Pepper and my coffee. No. Is it me, or does this guy sound a little Freddy-esque to anyone else? Sounds a lot like Freddy kind of vibes to me. Let's find out more. So apparently there's a TikTok market for this Hat Man, as there are quite a few TikTokers that have built quite the following based solely on the Hat Man. For instance, there's a man by the name of Patrick James, whose videos on the subjects like UFO and haunted houses reach nearly 300,000 followers on TikTok. And he hypothesized that the Hat Man could be an interdimensional being. Another social media influencer, Abby Sobata, whose quote, scary tales and interpretations of American folklore command an audience of more than 500,000. And she says that the Hat Man most often appears to children to feed off their negative emotions. Kind of sounds like Slenderman to me, but especially those arising from trauma, and is, in effect, a parasite. A TikTok influencer by the name of MJ Patek, meanwhile, told his own 1.1 million followers that if they've seen the Hat Man, they're in, quote, danger, and claims that some have woken up with scratches and marks on their body after he visits. The trend has gotten so extreme in certain corners of various social apps that a few users have been compelled to push back. There are some who defend this, quote, Hat Man. One such user says, quote, "That's the Hat Man," explained a self-described practitioner and teacher of traditional physical witchcraft, who goes by the handle of @witchfoot_official. They say, quote, "He's not dangerous, and it's not only people and bad childhoods that see him. He's an observer. He's in all cultures. He may be around when you have sleep paralysis or the shadow people come, but he is not one of them, and he does not harm you," end quote. So who or what is this man? As I mentioned before, he seems to have been born from a very dangerous and very inadvisable trend or, quote, challenge called the Benadryl challenge. What is the Benadryl challenge, you might ask? Well, the Benadryl challenge is an internet challenge that emerged very recently, as recent as 2020, and it revolves around deliberate consumption, excessive use, and in some cases overdose of the antihistamine medicine diphenhydramine, commonly sold in the United States under the brand name Benadryl, which acts as a deliriant in high doses. The challenge, which reportedly spread via the social media platform TikTok, instructs participants to film themselves consuming large doses of Benadryl and documenting the effects of tripping or hallucinating. Overconsumption of diphenhydramine can lead to adverse effects including confusion, delirium, psychosis, organ damage, hyperthermia, convulsions, coma, and even death. On September 24th, 2020, the FDA formally released a statement advising parents and medical practitioners to be aware of the challenge's prevalence and its risks. That's how serious it got, my friends. A side note, what is with it's generally the younger crowd, but what is with these kids and their stupid, dangerous challenges? I've seen so many over the years, worried about so many as having a young woman growing up under my care. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I hope she never sees this. Or how do they rationalize some of these challenges as being acceptable or okay or even cool? It just blows my mind. I'm thinking Tide Pod. I'm thinking that spoonful of dry cinnamon situation. And now this Benadryl thing. Ugh. Guys, do not do this. I hate that I even have to say that because, like, it seems pretty obvious, but don't do this. It's not a fun game. What are you doing? Anyway, the recreational use of diphenhydramine and addiction to diphenhydramine is well reported and documented in medical literature, and overdoses are treatable with correct intervention. Its psychoactive effects at high dosages, which are symptoms of a certain type of poisoning, are also well documented. In several cases, the overdose of diphenhydramine and other medicines like it can lead to a phenomenon referred to as a toxidrome, which can affect organs throughout the whole body, including the nervous system and the cardiovascular system. So, to sum that up, this is no joke. This medication can hurt you. Even though it's an over the counter medication, it's not something to be played with or challenged with. Several participants in this newish Benadryl challenge wanted to see if they could see and survive the Hat Man, and they were hospitalized as a result of the challenge. This includes 3 teenagers admitted to the Cook Children's Medical Center after they consumed at least 14 diphenhydramine tablets, and a 15-year-old Oklahoma teen who died from an overdose after attempting to take part in this dangerous trend. Attention towards the challenge was renewed again in 2023 when Jacob Stevens, age 13, a teenager from Columbus, Ohio, died 6 days after being placed in intensive care. Stevens had his friends film him as he consumed over a dozen Benadryl tablets and began convulsing shortly thereafter. Upon admission to the intensive care unit, it was found that he had suffered critical brain damage and he had died following 6 days of mechanical ventilation. Since this trend is mostly seen, revered, and spread on TikTok, it was only a matter of time before TikTok got involved. So, what did the platform have to say about all this? TikTok said it had not seen such a, quote, content trend, but proceeded to block the search term to prevent copycats. TikTok also expressed sympathy for the families and reiterated that this type of content is prohibited on the platform. Hashtags such as, quote, Benadryl and, quote, Benadryl challenge have been disabled, and the challenge does not appear to be widespread any longer. Although searching for, quote, Benadryl has been blocked since 2020, it can still result in suggestions such as Bena challenge or Benary challenge, just alternate spellings of Benadryl, and videos related to the original challenge. Now that we know generally what the Benadryl challenge is and how it relates to the Hat Man of urban legend, as well as how the stories were spread, we can delve into the origins of this curious character, the impact he's had on the allergy afflicted, and the questions that remain unanswered about his true identity. So, let's do it. Let's dive into the more detailed aspect of the man himself, Hat Man. The story of the Benadryl Hat Man began as a quirky urban legend, whispered among friends, shared on social media, and it wasn't long before people started claiming to have seen him in the wild, decked out in his signature hat adorned with Benadryl pill packets. But who is he really? It all started with a woman named Jane, who was having a particularly rough day during allergy season. As she sat on a park bench battling her symptoms, a kind stranger approached. He tipped his hat in greeting, revealed a veritable treasure trove of Benadryl, the well-known antihistamine that brings relief to allergy sufferers, and, grateful for the timely intervention, Jane snapped a photo of the mysterious man and shared it on social media. And of course, this encounter sparked a frenzy of interest. As the tale of the Benadryl Hat Man spread, more and more people reported sightings and shared their own stories of the serendipitous encounters. Before long, his fame grew, and he became a symbol of hope for allergy sufferers everywhere. No one knows the true identity of the Benadryl Hat Man. Is he a pharmacist with a heart of gold? A seasonal allergy sufferer on a mission? Or could he be simply a kind soul with a penchant for whimsy? Or is he something else altogether? Reports of the Hat Man and other shadow beings have been on the rise within the last several years, but have been whispered about and investigated in the paranormal community for decades. So, in order to find answers, I turned to someone many revere as, quote, the Hat Man expert, Mr. Timothy M. Brown Jr. From before, I did mention him. He is a site owner, administrator, and researcher of the Hat Man Project website. Mr. Brown started this project in 2001, collecting what few stories he could find on the web at the time. Since that time, his site has received hundreds of stories from people all over the world. It has taken him the better part of 20 years to fully understand what this phenomenon is all about, and after years of research, he has finally come to a conclusion of who or what the Hat Man is, and why he's appearing now, why he is appearing to people all over the world, and what to do if you have or have had an encounter with him. His site is the very first and only website solely devoted to the research, collection, and archive of information and stories relating to the Hat Man. As more stories are researched and collected, they will be posted on his site regularly. Why is this guy so invested in researching this Hat Man? Maybe his own story, in his own words, will help us understand. This is Mr. Brown's story from his website in his own words. My experience with the Hat Man came in 1994 when I was about 14 years old. I was living with my grandmother and my great-grandmother at the time at my home in Nashville, Tennessee. I had been staying up really late that night, and at about 2 a.m. in the morning, I found myself lying in bed nodding off as I was watching TV. The lights were all off, and the only light that was lighting my room was coming from the TV set in front of me. From where I was laying in my bed, looking down toward my feet, I had a clear view all the way into and through my great-grandmother's room, which was just parallel to mine, as there were no doors between my room and hers. I could also see into the hallway just on the far side of her room. Just inside the hallway was the doorway going to my grandmother's room. As I was laying there, with the covers pulled up to my face, nodding off, my eyes would open and fall, over and over again. And then, at some point, something I heard on TV made a noise, and caused me to wake up and open my eyes a little wider. Only this time, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I had always had a fear about intruders and what I would do if someone ever broke into our home. For a brief moment, I thought that the movement I was seeing might be my grandmother getting up to go to the bathroom. But as I moved my eyes more into focus, looking down through my great-grandmother's room into the hallway, I very quickly realized that it was not my grandmother. What I saw gripped me immediately with fear and dread. I saw a tall, human-like figure, and the figure looked like that of a man. The man had no distinguishable features whatsoever. I could see no eyes, no mouth, no nose, only blackness. He looked like a shadow, only darker, much darker. He had a very wide-brimmed hat and a long trench coat that flowed as he moved. I started to tremble. My heart began to race, and that moment I came to the conviction that there was indeed an intruder in my house. As I watched him move, in the back of my mind, I began to play out scenarios as to what he and I were going to do. Was I going to yell? Was I going to get up and run after him and try to fight him? I kept looking into the hallway, and he stood there at the threshold between my great-grandmother's room and my grandmother's room. He leaned his head and body into my great-grandmother's room and looked in, turning his head toward her, then toward me. I had my eyes closed as much as I could so I could still see him and yet still look like I was sleeping. He stood there for what seemed like an eternity, just staring. He then moved very slowly and without a sound back into the hallway, just out of view. As I kept watching, I then saw this blacker than black figure move toward my grandmother's room. Just like before, he leaned his body and head into her doorway, looking at her. Again, not making a single sound. He then leaned back and moved out of view and into the hallway. At this point, I didn't know what else to do. I was convinced that we had some kind of burglar in the house. So I summoned as much courage as I could, jumped up out of bed and yelling and charged into the hallway, ready for a fight. I turned into the hallway and he was gone. Obviously, my yelling and screaming startled and woke up my grandmother and great-grandmother. I told them what had happened, and needless to say, we didn't go back to sleep for a very long time. And when we did, we left the lights on. After my experience that night and during the next day, I spent a lot of time thinking and talking with my family about what happened. I was surprised to know that my experience of the man with the hat and the cape was not the only one that had happened in that house. As it turned out, both my grandmother and great-grandmother had seen the same thing. My grandmother relayed to me that a few nights prior, she had woken up in the middle of the night and too saw a dark figure walk past her doorway in the dim light of the hallway. Since it looked like it was wearing some kind of flowing robe, she thought it was her mother, my great-grandmother, getting up to go to the bathroom, wearing her evening robe. Then, too, my great-grandmother told me that she also had a separate occasion when she saw the same dark, shadowing being lurking in the house at night. I honestly don't know what to make of it all. And over the years, as time passed, I had grown very antagonistic against the whole thing, brushing it off as mere happenstance, a figment of my imagination, or perhaps the result of my nodding off and being in that in-between place of being half awake and half asleep. I thought about it every now and then, and then I had all but relegated it to the back part of my mind, paying little attention to it. I would continue to feel this way about the experience until the year 2001. That's when everything changed. I was driving a long distance one night and hitting the scan button to see if I can find something to listen to on the radio and help pass the time. The station landed on 1510 WLAC on a show called Coast to Coast AM with George Noory. It was probably 2 or 3 a.m. when the show came on. They were doing a show on what was called, quote, shadow beings. It was the first time that I had ever heard of something like that. As I listened to the show, nothing could prepare me for what I heard next. George Noory and his guest went on to describe people's experiences with one particular shadow being, a dark, man-like figure with a large, wide-brimmed hat and a cape. Immediately, I felt chills run down my spine. I knew at that moment that what had happened to me as a teen was not a figment of my imagination and was definitely not the result of me nodding off. I had seen what these people were describing. Exactly. I began researching as much as I could at the local library and on the internet. There wasn't that much information on the internet about the Hat Man or shadow people back in those days. And so I decided to build the first website dedicated to the research of shadow people, and in particular, the being that I had seen who became to be known as the Hat Man. Since 2001, I have collected and read hundreds of stories from others who have had similar experiences and have compared people's stories to try and make sense out of what has been happening. Even today, I receive at least 2 to 3 stories per week from people all over the world who are seeing this and other such beings. I now believe that I am in a place in life where I can draw some conclusion on who or what the Hat Man is and how he is connected to the wider experience of shadow people. These encounters are on the rise, and I believe there is a reason, a very good reason. That, my friends, is Mr. Brown's account of his experience with shadow people in general, and specifically the Hat Man, and how he became kind of the expert on this man. So, on one hand, we have reports of people being subjected to the Hat Man via sleep paralysis, schizophrenic hallucinations, or one-off freak sightings. But on the other hand, we have people trying to induce Hat Man sightings via the abuse of a class of drugs known as deliriants, which allegedly make you so delirious that you may actually see horrifying things like shadow people, and also, strangely and really specifically enough, spiders. Side note, I'm still getting total Freddy vibes from this because it all has to do with sleeping, falling asleep, dozing off. Are you asleep? Are you awake? Did you really see? I'm totally getting some Freddy juju here. Anybody else? In any event, a key aspect of the Hat Man's lore is that no one really seems to know where he comes from or what he wants. What we do know is that multiple people around the world have provided testimonies of having seen him, often during episodes of sleep paralysis or after they've had extremely dangerous doses of over-the-counter anti-allergy medication Benadryl. Benadryl, the drug most commonly associated with Hat Man sightings, as previously mentioned, is an anti-allergy medicine. And when taken in high doses, it allegedly makes you pretty loopy. Another thing that happens on high doses of Benadryl, or DPH, is that you simply die. But if you manage to survive, you may get to meet the shadowy figure that you've suspected has been watching over you since you were in the cradle. Maybe just don't do this because, guys, nothing good can come of it. One way or another, let's don't do the whole Benadryl thing, okay? let's leave that up to the medical professionals to administer and prescribe that. And let's not, like, I don't know, let's not use little pink pills to try to meet some fictitious shadow man. I think it's a pretty good idea to maybe avoid all that. Uh, anyway, my friends, what do we think about all of this? Shadow people? A specific shadow man? The Hat Man? The Benadryl Hat Man? Are they one and the same? Are they two different people? People have interlocked them and called them the same person. Some people say it's different people, but I don't know. And like I said at the beginning, my daughter was seeing a, quote, shadow dog for about a week or so after her trip to the emergency room for that severe allergic reaction, in which they pumped her full of allergy reactive medications, including Benadryl, and prescribed a follow-up treatment of the medication Benadryl for the next week or so. And Sundown and I do recall that she, on several occasions, was going to take her dog out, Charlotte, to go potty. And she would come immediately back in without even getting off the deck, come right back in. And she would be panicked about a large black dog on the property, fearing for herself, her dog, and her chickens and ducks that we have out here. And, so we would, of course, call to action. Here come mom and dad. We're going to save the day. And only for us to go and investigate and see no signs of any such dog on the property, nothing on the security cameras that are all around the property, and nothing with our own two eyes. No matter how long we searched, she was still seeing a shadow dog that we couldn't see. So, was she seeing one of these shadow entities? Who's to say? We do live out in the country, and we do get stray dogs on the property quite often, but they show up on the cameras. So I'd also like to add that I myself have suffered from anaphylactic shock several times in the past year and a half, for which I have also been in the emergency room and given high doses of Benadryl cocktail. And I have had no such run-ins with this Benadryl Hat Man or any black shadow dogs or any weird appearing spiders. Well, except for that really weird green and yellow one that I showed you guys on Facebook. But that one was real. That was totally real. That was not a shadow spider. That was like a very real, very big spider, very natural to this area. So yeah, there's that. So, I don't know. I don't know what to think. But what do you think? Let's talk about it in the comments down below. In case I haven't said it enough during the video, and once more for good measure, do not do. Don't. Do not. No, no. Bad. Danger. Do not do the Benadryl challenge, my friends. Just don't risk your life for that. Don't do that. Yeah, I don't know what else to tell you if you want to meet the Hat Man, but Benadryl is not the answer, okay? Please do not do that. And with that, that's all I have for us tonight, my friends. I hope to see you again in the next episode. And until then, stay safe out there, my friends.